Welcome to the MMA Outsiders Podcast with Andrew Pearson and AJ Hill.
Well, man, I'm happy to be talking to you today. We can just actually keep the video thing on. That seems like the audio is going to be fine. So, but yeah, I'm happy to be talking to you today, just because I was really impressed from what I saw, and the documentary is really interesting. It's your feature-length directorial debut, right?
Yes.
And just real quick, give me a kind of a background on you and where you come from and how you came to make this film.
Yeah, my background. So when I was a young kid, I was always an artist. I was always drawing and sculpting and painting, and kind of got into photography. And then when I started my professional career as an artist, that's when I started working on these big blockbuster films. Like my first film that I ever worked on was with Guillermo del Toro on Hellboy as a digital sculptor. So I designed some of the characters and worked on some of the characters there.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
As a visual effects artist. And then the next big film that I worked on was King Kong. There's a few in between, but King Kong was kind of a big one for me because I got to work on his face. On a small team where we designed and built all his facial expressions.
Is this the new King Kong?
This one was with Peter Jackson.
Okay.
So with Jack Black and, all these great actors like Adrian Brody. And Andy Serkis was performing and driving King Kong, so I got to meet him for a little bit, which was really cool. And then after building King Kong's face, then I went on to oversee all the faces for James Cameron's Avatar in 2009. So I worked with a big team, and we basically we oversaw all the faces for all the creatures and the monsters and all the Navi. And so my background in visual effects has really been over 12 years extensively working on the face. And at one point, I decided to buy a camera. I bought a Canon 5D, back when, those just had come out. And I just started shooting a lot of short videos.
Okay.
Just with, telling little stories around me. And that kind of led into my documentary work. And then, years later, here we are. And I've shot and produced and directed The Cage Fighter.
Yeah, awesome. So what kind of first drew you to Jeff? I know you met him a few years back, and you were struck by his just like his story, what was going on with him.
Yeah. So when I met Joe, it was back in 2013, and I was doing yoga at a gym. And immediately our first conversations, we had a mutual friend, and our first conversations were really about film, and so we connected on that. And then he just started kind of opening up and telling me that, he's just about to turn 40 years old, and his family doesn't know what he's doing right now, but he's training to go back into fighting. And he does it on an amateur level. He didn't have any aspirations to be pro. It's just one of those things that he escapes into, and I thought that was really interesting and really ironic that he would find escapism and self-healing in getting punched and punching people and stuff like that. So I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah. So you started kind of following him. You bought a red camera.
I did. I started, and I bought a red camera when it was secondhand. Usually these cameras are super expensive, just like your body. It's like $25,000. And then one day, Red, I've been following them. They had what they call battle tested cameras. Cameras that have been replaced, or exchanged. And from one day, it was like priced down to $4,000. So I like collected my pennies and went and got this red camera. And at a time when a lot of people weren't shooting, nonfiction work with a proper digital cinema 4K camera. So to me, that was a big inspiration for even doing the film. Is artistically and aesthetically, I knew it was going to have a certain look if I shot it with a cinema camera and not a photo camera or a video camera.
Yeah. So the story of how it came together is kind of a tale in itself, and we can kind of dive back into that a little bit later, because I was reading a little bit about what you wrote an article kind of explaining the process and how it worked. And so I do want to explore that a little bit later. But in terms of Jeff, he the subject of the film, right?
Joe, yeah.
Joe, sorry. You're Jeff, and that's Joe.
Jeff.
But in terms of Joe himself, like you said, he gets a sense of solace or fulfillment from fighting in the cage. When you're kind of exploring the subject material, and you're there filming someone's life, and then you go back later and you've got to construct a documentary. How do you keep that, both the honesty of the process, like you portray what's really going on, because some of this is very uncomfortable because his wife doesn't want him doing this. He goes through a legal battle with his ex-wife in terms of moving the kids. So how do you both portray it honestly, and also know that like he's going to be seeing this afterwards?
Yeah, it's it's a big task to be able to film for a number of years. In my case, I filmed 3.5 years with Joe and his family, sometimes in very private, intimate scenes, which are captured and edited in the film. To film for a number of years, to gather hundreds of hours. I had over 420 something hours of footage. How do you condense that down into a narrative? And that's really what you have to keep in mind, is that with all this material that I'm filming, as a filmmaker, I need to make sure that an audience can sit down and take in this story in a digestible amount. So we went from 420 something hours to 81 minutes, and a lot of that comes down to having key scenes and just having a really great editor to bounce story ideas off of. And the honesty, it's I think when we were looking at the editing process, my editor and I, David Teague, we singled out scenes that we thought really we should give a try in the film, not drive the film, but we should really try these scenes. We had about 12, what we felt were like kind of fence post moments, and then all the other scenes were labeled with a theme. So to reduce it down to 400 something hours, you really have to narrow it down to a theme. What are you really trying to say with the film? And in this film is very much about being a father, being a son, and for me, I wouldn't be able to have told this story if I wasn't a father myself. So on that level, I really kind of connected, especially because Joe and I have surprisingly similar relationships with our fathers. So we discussed that a lot. So this film, that theme is really about family lineage and family legacy. And who are you as a man based on the relationship that you have with your father? And that's kind of how we reduce it down to, if you will, a narrative.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about Joe's relationship with his dad. In the film, there's a difficult scene where you meet the father, and he kind of denies any actions that on his part that could have led to like any responsibility or any having to acknowledge mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that yeah? I mean, just kind of talk about that a little bit. Is that something that really do you think drove Joe in terms of this fulfillment that he's seeking from MMA?
He would never admit that, but people around would talk about it. So there was this one moment it was about 2 months into filming, and Joe had just got finished fighting for the first time in a long time, and he comes home bruised and battered, beaten up. He had just lost this fight. He sits down on his recliner, and his family just lets him have it. And his wife, Nori, she, within all this discussion about why are you doing this? Why are you fighting? Where's this coming from? You said you would never do this before, do this again. And, excuse me, she said, is this something about your dad? Do you still have something to prove to your dad? And that's when I believe that I actually had a film to explore, not a short documentary, because I was thinking this might just be a short film.
Yeah.
But when she said, do you have something to prove to your dad? That's when it just blew my mind, because I mean, what man doesn't have something to prove to their father, right? So I had to explore that, and that's why this is even a film. It could have just I could have just filmed for 2 months with the Carmens. He had just gotten into his fight, and a short film. But I really wanted to explore this. So anytime he would ever tell me he was going to go visit mom and dad, I would just politely ask, hey, is it okay if I join? Can I film you hanging out with your dad and whatnot? Because I just wanted to see. I just wanted to see what that relationship was like, and to also learn about that relationship when I was filming, not when I was not filming. It's just part of the filmmaking process.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, people, when you're filming for a long time, sometimes I would film for 4 or 5 hours straight without putting really the camera down. It's not like people forget that you're there, because I don't think that's really true. And it's not really fly on the wall, because I'm not a fly on the wall. I'm a human being, holding a camera that's this big, It's huge. It's like a 25-pound camera on my shoulder, and I'm definitely there and struggling. But it's not like people forget you're there or you're a fly on the wall or whatever this crap is. I think they just stop. They don't forget, they just stop caring, right? And at some point, they're going to get real with each other. And me being there, right next to them or whatnot, sitting on that couch with them or whatever, it becomes less of a thing. They don't forget, they just stop caring.
Well, it was one thing with just watching the trailer. The first thing you think is this is fiction, right? Because the footage and the quotes that you get, it just looks so scripted, right? Because it's too good. It's like,
yeah.
And then you keep watching and you're like, no, this is real life. These people are really saying this to each other.
I've had fighters watch this film and ask them hey, do you feel like we were being fair with fighters and the portrayal or whatnot? And they just said, the film at times was almost too real. So that's we've had a reaction when people have watched this film. At every screening, people will watch the film from beginning to end and not even realize that what they just watched was nonfiction, purely nonfiction, cinema verite. It isn't until I talk on stage or Joe's on stage with me after a Q&A and people start realizing, oh my God, this was a real guy's life. And when they say Joe Carmen, that's not a made up name. These are real people. But yeah, that was, to me, that was if I had one artistic endeavor, it was to create a film that was completely nonfiction and to put it in front of an audience and them either to lose themselves in what they thought was fiction or nonfiction or whatever, because they were just so they were so engulfed in the narrative, and it really came down to how I was shooting the film, the angles and the presentation, all that is all part of like the cinematic language of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, from what I can see, you did a fantastic job.
Right.
Now, I mean, it's about Joe, but there's other people kind of in the story as well. His wife, for one, and she's dealing with health issues. When you were creating the movie and when you're watching the movie, Joe's obviously is a very sympathetic character because this is a guy he literally shovels coal. It doesn't get more blue collar than that. Like in a ferry boat, right?
It's a Boilermaker.
Yeah. So and he goes and he fights in a cage secretly at night. So it's his story, right? But how do you what were you feeling in terms of the other characters, the people who are sitting him down and were having this like kind of intervention almost?
Oh man, there's so many people to thank and to mention, and were part of the film that maybe didn't make the film, or were in the film for a long time and then had a smaller role. So, of course, his family's in the film, and this is through and through a family story. But one of the people that I'm very close to, and I think the world of him, is Clayton Hoy, his rival. So in the beginning of the film, he faces this guy. He's much younger than Joe, fights him, and all what Joe wants is a rematch with this guy. Because the fight was pretty close. And I think, Joe could have had a real shot with him, because they were both kind of going through their things. They're separate things. But Clayton Hoy, he is an amazing fighter, and I filmed with him for 3.5 years as well, in parallel. So, this ended up being a film that was told through like Joe's narrative, and he's in the large majority of the film, obviously. Clayton has a handful of minutes in the film, but I filmed with him for hundreds of hours for 3.5 years as well. And he's in the film, I think, I don't know how many minutes, but it's under 10 minutes. It was, he committed to the project. He committed to me as a filmmaker, and I committed to him to tell his story. And I do believe that the amount that he's in this film is very impactful, and it says a lot about who he is and how he gets revealed, especially at the end.
Yeah. So there's a scene at the end where he's having a beer with Joe. Is that the scene you're talking about?
That's a bit of a spoiler there.
Yeah. Maybe we don't want to spoil that for the listeners. No, but it's I think just having not just written about MMA, but having been around it does strike me like just the first time reading it, it strikes you like, oh yeah, this is a very mixed martial arts kind of story.
Yeah.
I think there's this perception that, I mean, especially the guys that make it to the top, is this some glamorous world? And it's not. These guys, even at the highest level, there's very little money in the sport.
Yes.
At the amateur level, there's no money. But the culture is really interesting because it's a culture of camaraderie. It's a very masculine culture, but it's also like this sense where you can tell, like, the people who really buy into this life, they really believe it, and they want it to be the fighters that I've met. They want to be inspirational. They want their stories to be inspirational to other people.
Right.
And they give up a lot for this life. Do you think that was part of why Joe and Clayton let you kind of film to try to be inspirational to other people?
Oh man, that's I can't agree with I can agree with everything you just said. One of the things that really impressed me about getting to know a lot of the fighters during this process was how open everyone was emotionally, and everyone has an incredible story. you've met MMA fighters. Like you could just take any woman or any man that's fighting on the amateur level or on the pro level or on the highest UFC level, Bellator or whatnot. You could just spend 20 minutes with them and just be completely blown away by how much life they've lived. All prior to getting in that cage and as they're training, as they're fighting. So I was blown away and just very impressed with everyone that I had a chance to meet because, as a storyteller, I mean, I just love great stories, and it always felt like a really full day when I got a chance to hang out with a bunch of fighters because they're also super entertaining, the camaraderie is most definitely there, and we try to capture that as much as we could in the film. But yeah, I most definitely agree. It's kind of funny hearing you talk about fighters and how it's just all something that they all believe in doing, and it's how they all connect. How there's no money, all this stuff. It sounds like you were talking about independent film too. Like the independent makers are very similar in that way. Like we're not driven by money. We don't do it for that. And there's a lot of camaraderie and support, and you do it because of the community and also for the art. In their case, the fighting. So it's so funny. Yeah.
No, it is. There are definitely similarities. Now, in terms of Joe,
people think it's a big glamorous thing, right? Like when you see fighters go into that cage at UFC and they've got all these multiple camera angles and all these people, like everyone thinks it's just like high money, millions of dollars or whatever. It's not. It's like that for very few people, very few, and also they're probably not making their money from fighting. They're making their money from sponsorships and all the other things that surround the fight world. It's very, very similar to independent film.
Yeah, when you get out in there on the red carpet, it's like, it's this glamorous thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So, in terms of Joe specifically, you see his story a lot, even at the highest levels of MMA. Guys who can't walk away, can't do it, and it's because. Sometimes they can, and that's always good to see. I interviewed Nate Quarry last week, and he's old school UFC fighter. He's got tons going on. He's super happy. He's 45. He walked away when he had the chance, and it's just you don't see it, man. It's they have it in their blood, and they can't quit. One of the things that I studied and as a student. Was obsessive and harmonious passion as a psychology student.
Oh my God, you will love this film.
Yeah.
You have
yeah. Yeah. So this is like instantly like that was one of the
bits and pieces. But oh man, you telling me this now, I'm very excited for you to like sit down and with your girlfriend and like get a big bowl of popcorn or whatever and watch. Yeah. No, you'll be into it. Trust me. Yeah.
Absolutely.
IndieWire. Their reviewer said this is a fascinating psychological dissection, and when they wrote that, Eric Cohn is the writer. When he wrote that, I was just like, this guy gets it. This guy gets it, because I think as a doc filmmaker or even just a filmmaker in general, you have to be really curious about human nature, right? Like humans, why do we do the things we do?
Absolutely. So one of the things, there's a dichotomy in the study of passion between the obsessive and harmonious passion. Harmonious passion is when you love something, but you can let it go if you have to. It doesn't interfere with the rest of your life. You accept that you love it, but you don't need it to feel whole. And in Joe's sense, you get the sense that he needs this to feel whole. And with obsessive passion, there can be some overlap between the two. You can have kind of both going on at the same time, but with obsessive passion, it's less about the kind of getting in the zone or the love of the activity itself, and more for what the activity represents for them as a person and who they identify as. I think you see that a lot in this film, and I think you
Yes.
It's for some fighters. I think they enjoy, and I think Joe to some extent too, enjoys the fact that when he's in there, everything else kind of falls away.
Yeah.
And he's not dealing with the rest of his life. So I think there's an element of that, and there's an element of when he's not doing it, he's thinking about it all the time. Did you get that sense?
Oh man, the last Q&A that we did together was at the Orcas Island Film Festival, and Joe, he knew that there were fighters in the audience, and so when he goes on stage, a lot of times if he knows there's fighters, he'll kind of talk really kind of to those fighters and the audience. But he mentioned addiction for the first time. So in all these years that we've been, spending time around each other, I never mentioned addiction, and he never mentioned it. But on stage that day, he said, "Fighting is like an addiction," and that is a strong theme in this film for sure. And so we address that, but we don't hit people on the head with, "Hey, this is a film about addiction," because I think it's a lot more complicated than reducing it down to that term. There's a lot of reasons why he's chosen to fight and why he feels a certain way, but addiction is most definitely a theme in the film. But yeah, I think a lot of, why do we do the things that we do? Like for me, I escape into art, into filmmaking, and there's a lot of other things I should be spending my time on because I work at a tech company and I've got a family and I should just be happy with that, But for me, I have to do art. I have to create. I have to continue to make films, and I think that's where I find my happiness. So I can connect with someone like Joe as they're going through this journey of like this need or this like I don't even want to say desire, but it's just this need to fight, this need to create, this need to do something. And maybe it is an addiction because, I mean, you probably know better than anyone else. Like, how do you define something as an addiction?
Well, the definition of an addiction is a behavioral addiction is something that you do when it's maladaptive, when it's bad for you. And it's a habit that you keep doing it when it's not good for you. That's the basic definition.
Yeah, Rachel Rosen from the San Francisco Film Society, she's also a big part of the San Francisco International Film Festival. When we were looking at premiering this film in San Francisco, I got on a phone call with her, and the first thing she said was, "Okay, I love the film. This is a really new way of expressing addiction." And I thought, oh my God, I really have to show my film there. She gets it. So for her to say that, it's great to know that when you create something, even in nonfiction, right? Like you have to craft a narrative, and these themes that you hope, these themes that you care about and care about communicating to an audience. It's always really great to hear people really understand those things, even if you don't put that in the forefront,
Absolutely. Yeah. Man, there's a lot going on in a film like this. You've got the fact that, Joe he's working a regular job. He's got a regular life. And he's doing something that, he's dealing with, it's not CTE, but it's similar. What was the name of he went to the doctor to get a diagnosis, right?
He did, yeah. He's gone to a number of doctors during the filmmaking, and also a number of doctor visits prior to this film ever happening. I of course am not a doctor, but when I was filming with him, it was to check his concussion. Which hey man, this is high impact. He's chosen a high impact sport, unlike football or whatnot, and I think concussions they're just part of the territory.
Yeah, in a way, I empathize with Joe because it's really hard to give up training, especially I mean, when I went back to college, I stopped training completely, and I didn't train for 2 years, and I really missed it, man. And recently, I've been starting to go back and trying to find time and money to get back into it, and trying to do it in a way that's safe. But man, when you fall in love with something that isn't necessarily healthy for you, it's a tough thing to break, especially when you get a lot of your validation from that sport, from that activity. So it's like it's fascinating because in a sense it's self-destructive, but it's also, like you said, it's healing, self-healing at the same time. So
I know, man. For me, I'm just forever fascinated by why we choose to do the things we do, because like, it doesn't always add up, right? Like, why is he choosing the fight? Why is this person choosing this other addiction or whatnot?
Well, it's not a rational choice. It comes from something deeper, like it comes from a deeper need.
Exactly. It comes from someplace deeper. And then as a filmmaker, like, that's, to me, like, that's the job. Either it's a character in nonfiction or it's a character in fiction. Like, the job is to understand that deeper desire to a level that you can, you just have to understand that deeper desire and build and construct and write and shoot around that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what makes that. See, this is the human element, and I think this is what makes these stories so interesting. Is like, we're not purely rational beings, but we can relate. All of us have these kind of drives and desires, and relationships with that kind of shape our lives. You've got the pull of his wife, who's dealing with their own thing. You got him as a dad, and I'm not a dad, so I can't speak to that relationship yet. But he got his dad on the other end. And I mean, I had my dad call me a couple years back, and he called me to apologize about mistakes he made when I was a kid, and it was one of the most meaningful calls I've ever received.
Oh my God! Why did he do that?
He was just he called me because he had been at some conference and they talked about it, and he had been thinking about it. Like, man, there were some mistakes I made that I feel like I should own up to it, acknowledge. And it was, man, that was, I came pretty close to crying, man. That was a really meaningful call for him to do that and say that. I was like, and there were some things, because no father's perfect. And it was, I don't know, it was like, no, Dad, it was probably the most connected to him I felt in a long time, so.
And I'm happy for both of you because of that conversation, man. Like, it means a lot. I'm a father. I've got 3 boys of my own, a 10, a 7, and a 5. And my goddaughter, who's 13, is now living with us under guardianship. And to me, being a father is very connected with any art or any film that I'll ever create. It's and also just, being a son as well. You said you don't have kids yet, but you get it. I mean, the relationship you have with your father is, especially, that recent conversation, it shapes you. It shapes you as a man, and everything that you do in your life, like that conversation to the day you die will be with you. It's some meaningful stuff, man. And for me, I love stories about family. And I don't care if I'm like directing Wonder Woman 7 or whatever. It's going to be about about her having daddy issues or something. I don't know. Like, it always comes back to that. It's very Freudian. I mean, it's just, yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, man, that's cool. I'm really happy for you. No, I really am. It's hard. It's hard to have those conversations.
Yeah, it is, and it is hard, and I think that is what makes the film, like, because you can't choose that stuff, right? Yeah. And I think it's incredible that you're able to construct a film that doesn't look like fiction. It's real, yeah. And yet the characters and the storytelling and even the plot, like, are just they're they they tell a narrative. They tell this narrative, and I think a narrative that like speaks to us in a way that, in the same kind of way that fiction does, where it rings true to our experience and the lessons ring true. But yeah, I mean, so
yeah, it's really about that emotional journey. Like films, to me, the plots have to be, they're A to B, right? You're starting from A, you got to get to B. Joe wants a rematch with a young fighter that he just fought. That's it. That's the plot, man. But everything else, that emotional journey, is what hangs off of that really thin, clean A to B plot. And you need both to work. You can't just have this incredible, amazing emotional journey, but there's no plot, right? Now, what is that? And you can't just have, So you really need both to create a film. And when I met Joe and the Carmens, it was very clear that he had a goal, and he had a lot that he had to go through internally to be able to reach that goal. And yeah.
So the other story is the story of how it got made. And you kind of related kind of the origins of that. You started out with you were able to land a really nice camera, and you were following and filming this story that you found fascinating. But then it was time to try to turn it into a documentary. And there, frankly, first of all, I want to thank you. There are not a lot of top shelf documentaries in this space in MMA, and it's really cool that someone's telling the story at a really high artistic level.
Right on, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really fantastic to see. I've always liked that. But what did it take you to get the team that you needed to be able to tell this story at the level and the quality that you wanted?
Yeah. Oh man, it takes the best team that you could possibly put together to deliver a film. And I always believe you have to work with people that are far more experienced than you, that are far smarter than you, that are just far better than you in a lot of different aspects. Because there are so many aspects to build upon in film. To me, the film is cinematic because of the amount of work that we put into post-production on this film, the way it sounds, the way it's colored. The editing. It is in a massive amount of work. I think anybody that wants to get into films, if they haven't yet, the best advice I can give you is to make buddies that do different things in different parts of the industry. Like if they specialize in sound, they specialize in color, they specialize in editing. Man, producing is a huge thing, obviously. When I made this film, I shot it by myself, and I would say 90 something, 95, 99, whatever percentage, I shot this with Joe and the Carmen family, monitoring all the microphones as I'm shooting. So there was 7 microphones that I was monitoring and listening to as I'm shooting. But when you get into post-production, one of my good friends is a phenomenal supervising sound designer and editor. And the things that he was able to do in sound is part of that big cinematic experience. From the very beginning of the film, I mean, we this one scene we start off with, very clearly we're telling people, you better hang on. This isn't your mom and pop's, documentary. This is, we're going to bring it on multiple levels, visually and sonically, so, yeah, it takes so many people. And oh my God, my composer, Ben Winwood, who lives in the mountains of the UK or somewhere, and Ben Winwood builds his own instruments, and he's got a 1940s piano with all the creaks and the sounds, and he captures those creaks and the sounds and all those imperfections. But my God, this guy's phenom. He's the next big composer. I truly believe that. Yeah, no, the team is everything when it comes to building a film, and especially with this documentary, this nonfiction film, we really wanted to present it on all levels. Like it was a big story. You know?
Well,
it's an intimate story, but it feels big. You know.
Absolutely. And I mean, once again, man, I want to thank you for highlighting. I think what is probably a much more typical story than the Conor McGregor story or something like that. Like this is what you captured in this story happens in various forms millions of times across this country. You know, like I've met a professional fighter friend of mine just retired because he had surgery on his neck. And you know, it's like they don't get a big chance to make an impact in the sport. They get, you know, probably a few hundred people are there for their shows, follow their career in a lot of cases. And in terms of Joe, now he gets this chance to for his story to be seen much more broadly, and I think that's a really cool opportunity.
Right. You know, one of the, as we were making this film, I appreciate you saying that because you know, when we think about someone like Joe, he's the everyday man. You know, blue collar guy. You know, has a great family, but he still has this desire to go out and fight. You know, and we also, you know, we shot this film in the Seattle area. In Kent is where he lives, and then Seattle is where he works. And Clayton Hoy also lives in Bellingham, which is all just around the Greater Seattle area. But one of the things that we talked about a lot was, if Joe's the everyday man, you know, we can create an environment in this film that this story could basically happen in any part of the U.S., in any corner of the U.S. We don't have these like big landmarks. We don't have like the Space Needle in the film, and that's all intentional, you know, like because we wanted this to be everybody's story. He's just like anyone else watching this film, and yeah, that was super important. And we also, you know, a lot of people when they think of documentaries, they think of like timely stories. You know, oh, you know, this big political, social issues happening right now, so let's shine a light on it and have an opinion about it and get it out there to the next festival, whatever. Like, for me, that's not how I approach this. I wanted to tell a timeless story in nonfiction. So an everyday man's story could have happened anywhere at any time. You know, like that to me is what we try to do in this film.
No, I love it, and I agree completely. I think that's that was kind of an unformed question I had. I couldn't quite figure out how to put it, but I feel like there are a lot of Joes in the world. There's a lot of people that I feel like I was Joe at one point. You know, I was working a job that I didn't really care about. Yeah. And my happy point, my happy place was coming home and going to the gym and training. You know, getting in that ring and like sparring with the sense of camaraderie I had. And you know, there's so many people like that where life isn't maybe how you thought it would turn out, or really you maybe didn't give much thought to how you got here. And you're just here. You've got a family, maybe. That's right. You know, it's like, and you know, I think for people like Joe, MMA just plays this really important role, or you know, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be MMA, but I think that, you know, it's a very MMA story, and it's a very American story. It is
very American, yes, and it really is a really great way of kind of exploring redemption. You know, redemption and what that means to each of us on an individual level. I hope your audiences are going to get a chance to see it and connect with it on that level. You know.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, Jeff, thank you for making this story, and I appreciate you talking with me about it.
Great talking with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can the people find the documentary, and where can they find your work?
Yeah, so IFCfilms.com is the official website, so you'll be able to find The Cage Fighter on IFC's website. They're our amazing distributor. You can also find us on Facebook at Cage Fighter Film and Twitter. And our film is going to be released in theaters and video on demand in iTunes on February 2nd. It's going to play, if you're in New York, you can watch it at the IFC Center. And if you're in LA, it'll also be released in LA as well. And in Seattle on February 8th. So yeah, we'll start our theatrical run. But February 2nd is our big date. So people can watch it on video on demand or in theaters.
All right, sounds good. Well, I'll definitely be watching. Thank you so much, Jeff. I appreciate your time today.
Right on. And watch it with your dad.
My dad, that'll be tough. My dad's in Nepal right now, so.
Oh, that is tough.
Yeah. But yeah,
right
again,
on.
I appreciate it, Jeff.
Oh man, I appreciate you. Thanks for telling me the story about the tattoo. That's really cool.
Yeah, no, not to make it about me, but that came into my mind when you said that, so.
That's what this film has done for many audiences. People immediately connect with their fathers and their parents. And it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. Like the comparison to the movie Warrior was made.
Yeah.
And I really liked that movie. That was one of the first times that anyone made like an A-level MMA movie.
Right.
And I was watching just for that, but I really liked it because of the human relationships. I think that really gets us.
Yeah.
And draws us in.
Right on.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Thanks, Andrew.
Appreciate your time today.